Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. As you can see, I'm down here at my normal haunt of Circular Quay. It's first light, it's Wednesday morning, and a start to another pretty nice autumn day by the looks of it. A little bit overcast over there on the horizon, but I'm sure it's going to fine up and be a lovely day. I've got the ballet on tonight. I'll be over there at the Opera House. I've been a subscriber to the Australian Ballet for almost 40 years now, and I just look forward to going to the ballet 4 times a year to watch 4 performances with my wife, and it's just one of those experiences which transforms you, brings a bit of peace into your day, and is a great sort of date night to enjoy and to leverage. Anyway, before I head off to work this morning, I just want to go through yet another beautiful book summary. And today's book summary is entitled, just let me grab it, is entitled, let me get my notes, I just did my notes on the bus on the way in. So just to show you the notes for today. So the book is entitled The Catalyst by Jonah Berger, and it's a book which focuses on how to persuade and how to get the best out of people and how to influence change in a positive and a productive way. And there are some really powerful lessons that come from this book. Just like every book that we read, every book that we go through, there were days back in the 80s or weeks where I'd be reading 2 books a week. So I'd be reading the full book, cover to cover, making notes, underlining, and it was one of those periods of my life where I just tried to load up on as many lessons as I could to help me in my professional life as well as my personal life and relationships. But what I found was every single book that I touched had gems of wisdom, and it was just amazing that you could read a whole book and there was just nothing resonating with me in that whole book, but there was just the one sentence that I'd come across and I'd say to myself, wow, there you go, I've read a whole book, and it was that one sentence, that one learning made it all worthwhile. So just a word of warning, I guess, for people is that you don't pick up books hoping to pick up wisdom at every paragraph, but you may need to read the whole book just to pick up one item that could change your life or enable you to connect a number of dots. So it's powerful. So keep on reading, keep on learning is the call to action, and make the most of the available information that you have, regardless of where you find it. So getting back to this book here, the book called The Catalyst by Jonah Berger, the author kicks off with a beautiful quote where he puts it all into perspective and allows us to get a feel for where he's going to take us, a sight of the destination. And he says that sometimes change doesn't require more horsepower. Sometimes we just need to unlock the parking brake, to just release the parking brake and live. There are a lot of people, I guess, and I guess all of us are guilty of this, that we go through life with the parking brake on and we don't get to experience, the full ride, the full spectrum of what life has to give us, because we are reserved and we're not allowing ourselves to be free range and to experience the ups and downs and roundabouts, to be able to enjoy the experience. So the author then reminds us that change doesn't happen by being more persuasive or pushing harder. This is a big lesson for all the parents out there with young children, or the grandparents with grandchildren. You can't force change by trying to be more persuasive or pushing harder. Change happens when you remove the barriers to change, where you remove the FUD, the fears, the uncertainties, and the doubts that people have, rightly or wrongly. You know, as we say time and time again, a lot of those things that we have in our lives that restrict us, that hold us back, are irrational. They're irrational fears. But regardless of whether or not they're rational or irrational, real or unreal, we need to find a way, or we need somebody to come into our lives to help us remove those barriers that are holding us back, to identify and help us see where the handbrake is and to gently release it, so that we can go on this magnificent, glorious, sensory-filled ride that will enable us to expand, grow, and develop into a better version of who we are. So the author goes on to highlight 5 barriers to change, and I'll name them, and throughout this book we'll go through and we'll talk about them. So the 5 barriers that Jonah Berger has identified in his book. The barriers to change are reactance. That's a word I've never heard of before, reactance. And it's a very powerful word once you understand what it is. Endowment, distance, uncertainty, and lack of evidence. So the author here then goes on to articulate and clearly point out that lasting change is a slow and gradual process rather than a big bang. And to try and put it into a visual, the author says that lasting change is more like the formation of a canyon rather than a volcanic creation of a mountain. Something that takes time rather than something that just happens overnight. I'm not saying that change doesn't happen in an instant. I'm not saying that important change doesn't happen in a heartbeat. But getting to that point may take a while for some people. So we need to understand, appreciate, acknowledge, and embrace that the real changes that make the greatest impact are the ones which are slow and gradual and happen over time. So the author here reminds us that we need to stop pushing, or we need people to stop pushing us to change, because being pushed doesn't really work. Just like Aikido, I was a martial artist for a number of years, and what I learned in my martial arts was that sometimes when you take on force with force, it doesn't necessarily work out the way you want it to work out, and there is a big danger of meeting a bigger force which is going to smash you and crush you and destroy you. So the big lesson that I learnt through my master was that sometimes you need to use other people's force, other people's momentum, and leverage it and guide it, and use it to manipulate them rather than trying to be the energy source and force to oppose them. So Aikido is a martial arts form that uses other people's momentum, other people's force, to guide and harness them, to manipulate them. And what we need to appreciate and learn, and once again, and talk about, is that change is really hard. For many people, for many environments, even in nature, change is hard, and doesn't come naturally to most beings, to most people, and to most animals. And Jim Rohn, many years ago, I went to a seminar, said in his seminar, and it really locked in with me, it really resonated with me. And he said that, being successful is really easy, really, really easy. But being unsuccessful is a lot easier. I remember hearing Jim Rohn echo those sentiments when I went to one of his seminars, and I was just awestruck by how profound that statement is, that doing anything in life is easy, but doing nothing, doing nothing is much easier. And that's why a lot of people have the troubles and the struggles that they have, because they're just lazy and they prefer to do nothing than to do something. And of course, doing nothing is going to get you to doing nothing or being nothing. Warren Buffett, God bless him, one of the greatest investors and business minds that the world has seen, also says something quite similar. And he says that, expecting a company, a corporation, to turn around is, like expecting the impossible. Corporations, businesses, big enterprises, Titanics, are very, very hard to maneuver and to turn around. We've got the May Gibb here just pirouetting on a point, which shows that some small organisations and some people are easy to manoeuvre and to turn around. But if you brought the Titanic or a big ocean liner into this circular quay area, you'd see that it's really, really hard to turn them around, as are people. There's a thing called the conservation of momentum, which makes change very difficult for many of us, including myself. And the conservation of momentum basically says that we all tend to do the things that we've always done, and that pushing doesn't work, nor does providing more information, more facts, more reasons, more arguments, or more force. We are creatures of habit, and we have a thing called the conservation of momentum operating in our lives, which holds us in a particular orbit, which keeps us doing the things that we've always been doing, the things that we're wedded to, the things that we're rusted onto. You'll see that come the elections now, there'll be people who will continue to back and vote for the party that they've always backed with, regardless of the arguments that fat boy Clive Palmer come up with, or some of the other parties. At the end of the day, you want to stick to the things that you know and the things that have worked for you over your life, rather than take risks and put tomorrow in other people's hands. So the author here reminds us that people need to remove roadblocks, remove the barriers, and it's a thing that children do quite naturally. When you've got a baby wanting to grab something, it doesn't matter what you put in their way. Their single purpose, their focus, will ensure that they go over, under, around, or through any obstacles that you put in their way. And to a certain extent, we adults need to become children again and find our mojo, and just to keep on pushing to get the things that we want in our lives, rather than to be like the elephant who was chained as a little calf and has a roadblock, or thinks that chain is constantly on their leg and will keep them from going where they want to go. The way you help people actualize change is to make sure that you try and make it easy for them. Allow change with less energy. So if you're in sales, whatever you're doing in life, if you're a parent, a grandparent, the best way to impact and invite change is by making it easier and ensuring that the other person needs less energy in order to do it. And to understand that, once again, it takes time, and little things done consistently over a long period of time have a magical impact on change. So the visual that the author gives us is that a trickle can become the Grand Canyon. So water running time over rock can eventually break down that rock and create the Grand Canyon. So let's go back to those 5 points that the author gives us in terms of the things that we need to try and overcome. And the first word, a new word that I learnt today for the first time, is reactance. Reactance. I've never heard of that word before, but it is a word that I will incorporate into my vocabulary from here on in. So reactance is basically a person reacting to something. So as we have the law, the Newton law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. People also have a similar sort of reaction. So when you push people, they tend to push back. Now when you force things, they tend to force you back. So this is where the author talks about this word reactance, saying that people, we all have an anti-persuasion system, a force field operating in our lives to keep us within our orbit. It's our safety valve. It's our thermostat that keeps us operating at our self-image, because you can't over or underperform the self-image that you have, and it's this reactance that keeps us, I guess, authentic, rightly or wrongly. Now, it all depends on what your self-image is, but this force field, this thermostat, this reactance that we have naturally available to us will enable us to push back on things that we feel are threatening to us. So the author here reminds us that there is this reactance happening all around us. There are people who are willing and able to push back. So the more you push them, the more reasons you give them, the more you try and persuade them, the more they're going to push back and derail any opportunity that you have of helping them change or creating change in their life, even though you may know that this change that you're inviting them to take is going to be of benefit and is going to improve their lives. but you can't just push it on them. You just can't thrust it upon them. You need to help them remove their guard, so to speak. So the way you do that is you need to help convince themselves, or we need to help convince ourselves by listening more intently, questioning them, and allowing them to come up with the answers, and to use empathy. The other point that the author makes is endowment. There are people who are rusted onto, who are wedded to their ideas and are not willing to let go. So you need to help them let go by, I guess, as we said before, listening, questioning, showing empathy, and taking an Aikido perspective and using their energy, their negativity, or their direction and energy to allow them to see a new and a better world. Because at the end of the day, you need to be able to let go in order to allow new and better things to come into your life. The third point that the author makes out of the 5 points is distance is something that impacts the way we are and the lack of our thirst for changing. And what we need to do is to break down the distance to allow people to see things a little bit clearer. And the author says the way you do that is by chunking things down, making them less risky, allowing people to step into the middle ground before going onto the top rung of the ladder or the top step. So providing a staircase to bigger and better change by taking small steps, as opposed to taking step functions where you're taking big, risky steps, which are unnerving to many people. So trying to break down the distance by, placing a ladder with lots of small steps between where you are and where you're capable of ending up and going. The fourth point is uncertainty. Now, people thrive on uncertainty. So if you're able to help people gain a bit more certainty in their lives, you will help them invite change into their lives. Because what happens is, the author says here, and we've got the Catherine Hamill now just leading off, what the author says here is that people tend to hit the pause button when they're uncertain. And you know that when you hit the pause button and say, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it next week, or I'll do it when I'm ready, you'll know that from that point on, it's just not going to happen. But the way to get things happening, according to this author, is to enable people to become more certain in terms of their future. And to make things more certain, you need to make things risk-free or less risky, to provide a risk-free trial to get people to do things. And that's one more example of what we can do to make our lives a little bit easier. The last point is that people search for evidence. They need proof, and lack of evidence is the thing that holds people back and causes them to freeze. So, as a parent or grandparent, a boss, a peer, you can help people by providing them with proof, allowing them to be able to distinguish and understand the difference between pebbles and boulders, because everybody has opinions, but not everybody's opinion is of equal weight. Some people's opinions are featherweight, other people's opinions are heavyweight. We need to be discerning with the opinions and the ideas that other people bring into our lives, and to understand the difference between pebbles and boulders, is what the author says. And the author finishes off the book with a lovely story about two chefs working in a fine dining restaurant, a Michelin restaurant with lots with the stars, the reputation, and everything that you'd ever want for. But you've got two chefs there who have to finish off their dish, and they need an orange for the dish, and there's only one orange left, and they're fighting over the orange. Who's going to have the orange? And I guess this story reminds us of our lives, that we too are living in a world which has our oranges, and we have our dishes to prepare, we have our customers to satisfy, and we are running out of time. And the author says that the chefs are fighting and are at each other's throats about this orange. But it's only when they realised at the end, when they cut the orange in half, they realised that one of the chefs needed the orange juice to complete his dish or her dish, and the other chef required the orange peel to complete their dish. So they were fighting over the orange, but it was only through communication. It was only through empathy, understanding, and discussing what they were doing and what they needed to do, that they realised that they needed the same thing, but different aspects of the same thing, a different element of the same thing. And once the orange was cut in half, that is when they realised that they could live in harmony together and do their job and be successful in their own ways. So thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club. You've joined me on my YouTube channel, and another book summary, another day, and another wonderful message for each and every one of us. I hope you got something from it. I most certainly did. And for those who know me well, I try and learn something new every single day. And not only do I try and learn something new every single day, I try and pass it on. So live, learn, and pass it on. Happy Wednesday to all. And I look forward to chatting to you again from a different place with a different message of empowerment, where we can try and incorporate some of these learnings into our day. We can learn some life hacks and make the most of what we have, and be examples for our children, grandchildren, friends and family, so that we can all be better off at some point in time. Take care, Yasas, and I'm off to work now. Bye for now.